Today we are going to read a science fiction story. First, you will read to understand what the story is about. Then, after this video, you will reread with a partner or by yourself to identify the narrator and compare his or her point of view with the one that the narrator was previously in the one you read. We're going to look for clue words that help us identify the different points of view. When we are reviewing what we learned earlier this week, we know that first-person point of view is when the story is told through the narrator's eyes or how the narrator thinks and feels. We also know that when narrators are not characters of the story, they look from the outside of the story in, and that is called third-person narration. So today we are going to decide which is which. Before we begin reading, we are going to underline the title, Is This Real? We're also going to identify text features like this illustration, our closed reading habits, and we will look at our questions. Question number 1 says, this passage is told by a third-person narrator. Select 3 sentences that indicate the narrator is a third person. Number 2. Reread the paragraph 3. If the story were told in first person, which of the following is most likely? I see the word if here. If the story were told from first person, which would most likely be true? So that's important for us to think about because we are going to be using our inferencing here and using the background knowledge we know plus our details to make an inference. Number 3 is compare the points of view of the narrators in If Only This Were Real and Just a Bunch of Rocks and Bones. Use the Venn diagram on page 291 and organize your thoughts. Explain how the points of view for the 2 stories are different and the same and compare. Okay, so while we read today, I want us to look for key clues that help us identify where they are showing the narration in this story. Please put your finger on the first word, and we are going to begin reading. If only this were real. Hoshi stared at the clock over a panel in the spaceship. The school day was almost over, and she couldn't wait to meet with her friend Jerry. Their newly created visual game awaited them on Deck C. Incredibly exciting, the game made space-time seem to pass much faster. At least the new teacher, Vox 23, was more interesting than the last class, an instructional robot. Soon it completed the lesson. Then it announced what it always said. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon and have another lovely day. Hoshi glanced out the window into the blackness of space. Every hour of every day the view looked the same. Having spent half of her life traveling to a lush planet in another galaxy, Hoshi recalled little else. She would be 15 by the time they arrived at their new home. After class, Hoshi and Jerry raced straight to Deck C and entered one of the 3D rooms that could create any scene a person imagined. Jerry excitedly pressed the buttons and called out, "Computer, run the program! Old Earth School on a big hill! Make it look real!" The bare room instantly changed into an old-fashioned classroom with a dusty blackboard mounted behind an old wooden desk. Sunlight from large windows filled the dusty air. As Hoshi and Jerry looked outside, they could see white clouds, blue skies, flowering trees, green grass, and a playground. They politely asked their human teacher, Miss Rant, "May we go outside for recess?" "If only this were real, Jerry," Hoshi said wishfully. "Maybe sometime in the future things truly will be this good." All right, the closed reading habits box says, what is the narrator's point of view reread the story and underline words that show what the narrator thinks or feels about the characters and the events. I'd like you to go back and do just that. Find words and phrases that show you how the narrator thinks about and feels about the characters and the events. Go. Okay, so looking for types of feelings, I see right away in the third line in the second sentence it said, she couldn't wait to meet her friend Jerry. That's a feeling. I'd like you to turn to your neighbor and tell what kind of feeling that is if you couldn't wait to meet your friend. Good, I hope you said happy or excited. Then again here it says incredibly exciting. That is showing another feeling. Next, all the way down at paragraph 4, it says, Hoshi and Jerry raced straight to deck C. Those are events told about both the characters that we have in this story. It also says here, Jerry excitedly pressed the buttons. So how is Jerry feeling right there? Good, I hope you said excited. Another time here, I see where she screams, make it look real! What kind of feeling would you be feeling if you were the narrator and someone said, make it look real? You would probably be excited or enthusiastic. Next, down here, it says at the bottom, they politely asked. That shows the characters' actions and feelings. When you're being polite, you often care about something, or you're showing that you respect something. Lastly, the last thing that we see the characters say is, if only this were real, Jerry, Hoshi said wishfully. So when you're wishing for something, you feel longing, or you wish that you had it, or you hopeful. I'd like us now to go to the questions. Question number 1 says, this passage is told by a third-person narrator. Select 3 sentences that indicate the narrator's third-person point of view. You need to look for words that show the characters, but not using words like I or me or my. So words that show what the character is doing or thinking or acting like. Next is number 2. It says, reread paragraph 3. If the story was told in first-person point of view, what would it likely be part of the story? A, would they Hoshi's thoughts and feelings about traveling through space? B, details about Hoshi and Jerry's actions but not their point of view about the trip? C, different ways multiple characters viewed the trip? Or D, more information about 3D rooms on Deck C? We know that first-person point of view says it's a point of view of how someone thinks or feels about story events. So this clue word right here, thoughts and feelings, tells us that A is correct. Next, we are going to go down to our Venn diagram, and we're going to fill in the differences between the 2 stories and the 2 points of view. I'd like you now to change your page to page number 291. Okay, in the story of just a bunch of rocks and bones, what is something that you remember the narrator saying or doing? Go ahead and tell your neighbor and write it down now. Okay, so I'm writing down here, I remember the narrator in A Bunch of Rocks and Bones uses words like I, me, my that are pronouns. Also, a clue here is LeBron shows the reader what he really thinks and feels about the museum. And if only this were real, we have a different point of view. Here, the narrator uses the pronouns she, her, they to describe the things Jerry and Hoshi say and do. Can you think of another detail from the story we just read? Go ahead and add it now. Okay, hopefully you guys added another exciting detail. Lastly, both stories tell about something children are experiencing. Oops. For your homework, you need to answer the question number 4. Use information from your discussion and diagram to compare points of view of the narrators, if only this were real, and just a bunch of rocks and bones. Use at least one detail from each text to support your response. And then look at that little hint box. Compare how you learn about the thoughts and feelings of each narrator in the story. Don't forget to go back and reread quietly to yourself while answering these questions.